Hey guys, and welcome back to the Hobby Dude 007 channel and the Model Car Cup series. Guys, I've had to make a decision, and I am pretty confident that some of you aren't going to agree or like it. Well, you know, I got to do what I got to do to get this done. The Acme show is right around the corner, and I have made a change in directions on something. And you know what? Let's talk about it. If you recall, maybe a month ago, I did a video that I just said, look, I got to stay focused on finishing up the telephone booth show rod. And I set the Mustang, anything else I was working on, I set everything out of my mind, and I finished that telephone booth show rod. Well, as it gets closer to Acme, I've been looking over my 32nd scale Lumina, as you remember, that was going to be debuted last year, but I had the windshield issue, and so I just set it aside and let it go. Well, as I was prepping it, the only thing left for me to do to that really was just I wanted to wait on the decals. So I have the 32nd scale decals from Slicks, the old ones, but they're great. So I had to do that and mount the hood and the trunk up, and that was it. The car would be finished. And the more I looked at it, you ever had those projects where you look at them and you go, man, I wish I'd have done this, or I wish I'd have done that? Well, I started doing that with that, and I thought, you know what, I've got time to do this. But to be on the safe side, I decided the Mustang is going to have to be set aside here for a little bit for me to finish it. A couple of the things on the Lumina that I do want to finish. And keep in mind, guys, that 32nd scale Goodwrench Lumina, and for you new subscribers that don't know about it, I'm going to show some pictures here in a minute of where we started. We've taken a snap-together toy from back in the late 80s, early 90s, and we've converted it to a full detail build. And it's been challenging, but it's also been a lot of fun. Well, as I looked at it, I started seeing something that I didn't want to have to go back and go, you know, I wish I'd have done this or that. And there was a few things on the body, despite, well, take a look at this paint job here. I was very pleased with it. And I've adapted some photo etch for the body panels and things like that. And it really was looking good, but there's a few things to the body I wanted to change. And of course, if you remember, I had to make a new windshield and rear window because once they were on the car, there was just an enormous gap at the A-pillar, and there's no way I could let that stand. So that's why I didn't take it to Atlanta last year. But so this time, I've got that taken care of, no big deal. We just used some evergreen 15 thousandths plastic. And then I started thinking about windshields from some of the other ones that I could modify or adapt, and I'll show you all that later. But long story short, I did take the body off, not changing anything on the chassis. I've loaded as much detail in there as I possibly could, but I am making a lot of modifications, several modifications to the body. So that needs to stay my focus. If I stay on the Mustang and I work a little on this and work a little on that, just like with the phone booth, it was just dragging out, and you saw how quickly I got the phone booth done. So I'm going to try to do the same thing. So the Mustang is getting set aside, and I am going to get back on that as quickly as I get this done, which hopefully this won't take that long, but we're going to see, because of course I still have squad room stuff, things like that I'm taking care of too. So if you're not familiar with this build, as I said, here's a few slides just to show you where we are. So enjoy these. Any questions or comments, hey, be sure you put them in the comment section. As you recall, we started with the AMT and Monogram 1/32nd scale stock car series that came out again back in the late 80s, early 90s. And we started with these two Luminas, and we combined a lot of the parts because some of them, well, we'll get to that a little bit. Then we found the decals, and you can still find these on eBay, the last I looked anyway. I don't know if you can find the Jacks decals in 32nd anymore, but I know you can still find the Slicks. The Jacks on the left were pretty good quality, but the ones on the right are the Slicks decals, and there's enough on one sheet to do 2 cars, so if you need to double up the decals, which I'm not sure yet if I'm going to need to, but we'll see. Next thing up, because we're converting a snap-together toy, was to do a list of what had to be modified. And as you see here, this was a task because all of this had to be modified, scratch built. Some of it I ended up having 3D printed. But a pretty long list of things that needed to be done on my build sheet. Then it was time to start converting the snap together stuff over to a glue. So you see the pin marks where everything snaps together have been filled in with styrene rods. The front suspension spring buckets and upper A-arm brackets were scratch built out of sheet plastic. Some of the frame rails, you see the putty on the back of the frame rails there, where those were really thin, very hollow. So those were built up with some styrene and some putty. The roll bars on the AMT kits were actually, the side bars anyway, were molded into the side of the inside of the body, which you'll see when we get over to the body, and that had to be removed, and that was totally unacceptable. So we took the monogram kit and removed the sidebars and grafted those into the AMT roll cage. And we also modified, since this picture, some of the configuration of the roll bars on the inside as well. Next up was the fuel cell area. Since the trunk was going to be cut open, I took this is a picture of the real car, the Goodwrench car. The 1990 Lumina, actually, and along with this fuel cell picture, and sent them to my buddy Miguel with HobbyWerks and gave him the dimensions of what I needed for 32nd scale. And he took and reproduced this in 32nd scale, which if you'll go back and look at the picture I just showed you, the real car, he hit it right on the head. So that worked out great. Next up was we had to make the brackets for that fuel cell to sit in there. And as you can see, and you can also see the white peg up there, I had to put in I think that's the top of the oil tank case. Then we were on to making the suspension buckets, and you notice I added the proper frame rails in there. And then we started getting primer on a lot of the stuff. I've omitted, you can go back to some of the older videos and see, I've omitted some of the stuff that was done to that rear suspension, and of course you'll see some of it a little bit later on here. And then test fit. You see the additional bars I added up here in styrene, and then test fit the dash, and we'll come back to that dash in a minute. And you get another look at those spring buckets and the upper A-arm brackets. Next up was test fit the body. Again, y'all know me, I test fit everything, and you see the red and the black marks there. A lot of that's where the putty goes, as well as, and the reason that putty is going to have to be on the outside is those molded in roll bars on the body, they actually had little ripples and ridges on the outside of the body, because this body's pretty thin, even 32nd scale. So that had to be filled in and smoothed out. Then some of the little parts inside, and again, guys, I'm skipping over a whole bunch of stuff here, but the seats, I went ahead and made 2. These have those little checkered pleated kind of cushions in them, which wasn't accurate for the Lumina that I'm doing, the Goodwrench Lumina. So I putted that up, sanded that out, used some flocking, actually some embossing powder, and made the felt area. And the seat belts, are from a 1/32nd scale airplane kit, or actually Edward 1/32nd aircraft seatbelts. And thank goodness the Simpson and the built decals for the seat and for the seat belts was on the decal sheet in 32nd scale. Then we had to start looking at the tires. Now this tire on the left with the yellow on it, that is actually from a slot car, the tire is. And I was just comparing it to the monogram tire. And you see, I really like the monogram better, and I was going to be doing decals on that anyway. And the rims are from, again, Miguel at HobbyWerks. And those are shrunk down to 32nd scale. And here you see the finished tire. That's 32nd on the left and a 24th on the right. And then we got into our brakes. The center hubs and the brake calipers were again from Miguel. And the photo etch rotors, actually, I found those online and ordered those from France. And to my surprise, I had them in about 10 days. But aren't those cool? Next up, we started getting some color on the chassis after we got it primed and all of our snap together parts off of it. And we painted it in poppy red is the color, which is actually more orange. These pictures really make it look red, but this is MCW, Model Car World, poppy red. And like I said, this is really more orange than you see. Well, that oil cooler there just wasn't going to do, just a chunk of plastic sitting there. And again, this was a snap-together toy to begin with, so we had to do some souping up, so to speak. So you see here we use some photo etch screen and some aluminum tester's paint, as well as some aluminum strips that I made from the bottom of an old lasagna pan to wrap around it. And that gives it much better look. Onto the suspension. We took some brass wire, wrapped it around a piece of K&S tubing. I can't remember the exact size right now. It'll be on one of those other videos, but we'll cover that again in another video. And then we painted those for the different spring rates, and you see the orange and blue there. Those are going to be on the front, and the white and yellow will be on the rear springs. And you see the rear end is finished. You got a couple of loose wires there where they're going to be, or hoses that are going to be connected to the rear end cooler. And the front suspension. And you see the brake lines coming out of the calipers there that'll be routed up to the chassis and back to the master cylinder. Next up was the dash. Now, most of these stock cars have an access panel so you can get to the gauges, and these are no different. The access panel was right above the gauges, and so I cut that open, and you see a roll bar that's run right across there underneath the dash. And here it is with the gauges, which this is just a couple of sizes of K&S aluminum tubing. And I plugged the back with a little bit of epoxy and then drilled that out and then ran the cables to the gauges in there. And then I used a piece of fine detail wire in white to represent zip ties. And so you see each of the lines coming out of the gauges strapped to that roll bar. And on the front, thank goodness, those Slicks decals once again came with the gauges in 32nd scale. And then it was just a matter of going through my photo etch gauge bezels and getting some of the smallest ones I could find, and lo and behold, they fit perfectly. So we've got some bezels around the gauges. And then I took some clear fingernail polish, don't tell Amanda, on a toothpick, and just put a little lens right over the top of those. Then we made an aluminum, well, actually a piece of sheet plastic off to the right there with the electronics on it, and we covered that in a piece of bare metal foil matte aluminum, and then attached the packs onto it, and then ran the wiring underneath. Then we started working on the inside, the rear end cooler pump, the fuel line on the far right side, and this was in latter part of the year 1989. And then you see coming out of the oil tank over there, you've got the breather over there, and then the lines coming out and going forward. And then here's a look with the dash test fitted in and the fire extinguisher. And by the way, that fire extinguisher I had to make from scratch. The one that came with the kit just didn't cut it, so I scratch built that by just putting a piece of styrene rod in the, not tube, but rod, into the Dremel and slowly turning it and shaping it. And then we put our line and stuff for the fire suppression system in there. The shifter I wasn't really that pleased with until I got it in the car, and it actually doesn't look as bad as I thought it was going to look. I was going to scratch build something else, but I don't think it turned out that bad. And moving to the back of the car, you see Miguel's fuel cell there. And that the bolt heads on the ends are from Protec. And you're going to see those all over the place. The fuel filter there is just a piece of K&S tubing. Here's another look from the rear. You've got that overflow already strapped to the roll bars, just like you saw in the picture of the real deck lid. And then moving to that front suspension after everything's mounted. Sadly, those springs are in there and you can barely see them unless you're looking from the back. But I think they look pretty good. And the shocks too, by the way, were items from Miguel at HobbyWerks in 32nd scale. And the shocks really look good. Then from underneath, you see the weathered exhaust. And again, test fit, test fit, test fit. And after we got our test done, we started working on that body. So we'll back up here, and this is a look at where those roll bars were molded in, and they left those marks on the outside big time. So we had to sand those off. So we got those sanded down and removed, then started putting our mud on the outside, and a couple of spots on the inside where the injection pin marks were. And we went ahead and cut the trunk out at this point too, as well as you see the brake duct work on the front there. And we'll get a closer look at that in just a second. Moving to the rear, you see where we grafted the rear bumper on, and we drilled out the inlet for the fuel and the overflow tube, which was a very small piece of, I can't remember the number of the syringe, but it was a syringe piece. And here's a look at that front end again. Now you see where we opened the vent for the oil cooler as well as the brake duct coolers. And I'll show you something cool about those here in a little bit too. Then we started manicuring the body. We got a coat of primer on it, started looking for any issues, and where we found some, we sanded it back down again and reworked it again until we got it smooth, because black is going to show up every little ripple. So you want to make sure it's slick. So probably about 3 coats of primer, and then got it wet, looked down the side, make sure everything was really smooth. Now here you see after the final primer and the chassis is underneath it, we're test fitting again You'll notice on the left there, the engine block, that was the kit engine block, and that was probably the thing that I was most disappointed in, was that engine. No matter how much I worked on it, it still looked toyish, and I just didn't like that at all. It just had too much of a toy look to it. And as you may recall, Matthew with Model Car Videos printed me a 350 in 32nd scale, which it's in paint right now, so we'll be building that too. In addition to what I'm going to do to the body, I do want to finish that engine out too. And of course, here's the deck lid and the hood. You see the injection pen marks that had to be straightened up there. And all of that stuff that's under the ribbing under the trunk is a copy of what I scratch built for my 24th scale Lumen. I sent him pictures and measurements, and Miguel was gracious enough to knock that out for me. And here is the chassis and the underhood and under the trunk in the poppy red orange. And again, that body. And again, I've jumped over a lot of stuff, guys, but let me get the camera readjusted here, and then we'll start talking about what I'm going to be doing to the body and then finishing up that engine. So stick around. Okay, guys, so I want to share with you a couple of things real quick. I'd mentioned the tires and all were finished, and hopefully you can see that. I think they turned out really, really good. This is going to be up on a stand with the wheels off, so you can see the brakes and all that stuff too. Yeah, you can see the valve stem down there, the decals on the rim. You can barely see it on camera, but under light you can see the red ring around the edge. Hopefully you can see that. If you can't, when you see it in person, you will. And to tone down the white a little bit, I took one of the Tamiya weathering kits with a little bit of the soot, very, very little, and just lightly went over the letters, so it toned them down just a little bit, gave it a really good look there. But that's our wheels and tires. And like I said, everything's pretty much done. We took the engine, like I was saying, this is just too toyish to me. I drilled out for the plugs and as well as the pipes, and you see the clock mechanism or the clock gear for the flywheel, which that's just mocked up right now. It wasn't finished anyway. That's just a plastic gear, but I think I'm going to do with the other one the transmission on it, so I'll save that. But if you'll notice, looking straight down the sides, that the heads are flat, which, guys, that's not right. The headers that came with this thing snapped in, and they're atrocious. They don't even look like they're in the right scale. But these heads that are angled straight up, almost you'd think it was a nail head engine, an old Buick nail head, but it just didn't look right. So thank you again, Matthew, for what you pulled off. And like I said, that's in paint, so you'll be seeing that pretty soon. And then for the headers, if you recall, I went ahead and drilled these out, and I've done this with the other engine as well, and or made them that size. And then the spark plug ports were already in it, so Matthew did a great job. But of course, this is just simple solder. Let me get a spare piece over here, so it'll be easy to bend into the configuration of the headers coming out of the engine. So and we'll copy right, I've got plenty of pictures of RCR engines, so we'll copy right off of those, and then we'll get those painted up too. Now onto the body, I've got a piece of this ultrafine mesh, and I have some photo etch that I've cut down that was going to be going over the air duct intakes for the brakes as well as for the cooler. And I had a piece of bare metal foil, matte aluminum over the grill here and had done a wash, and it looked okay. But every time I looked at this, I kept thinking, I wish I'd have cut that out and put a piece of this mesh in there. And I just finally decided, you know what, and I even thought about it, I cut this piece out just to lay over it to see. And with these duck things being over this stuff, I thought to have a piece of bare metal foil, that's just not going to cut it. So I'm going to open this up so you'll be able to see through the mesh right through it, and right to the radiator and into the car, like the real thing. But I just can't let that stand. So all this is going to be sanded and cut out. I'll be cutting that out here probably within the next hour or so. And I hate to mess up that paint, but you know what? Hey, it is what it is. The rear window, by the way, I went ahead and adjusted that, and I figured out a way to do the stock rear window, and as you see, now it fits. And even on the chassis now, it's a good fit. So we're going to be painting this instead of using the one that I made. And I'm going to surprise you with the windshield later. But I think you're going to like it as well. So that's what we're doing. So I'm getting ready to cut this out here shortly. And I'll be taking pictures and some videos as we go. So you'll be seeing the progress on this on the next couple videos, or the next few videos. And if things are drying, I may touch back on the Mustang. I'm trying my best not to get myself distracted onto something else, guys. When I stayed focused on that phone booth, I got it done really quicker than I thought. So I'm going to try to do that with this too, but I know I'm going to have some paint and stuff drying on it as well. So that's it for this one, guys. Sorry about the Mustang, but I will be back to it, and hopefully in short order. Guys, appreciate you. Head over to HobbyNut Models and check out Mark's inventory. Pick up whatever you need, you can probably find over there, whether you're a military or a car modeler. Guys, God bless. I will see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.